Right. Okay, we're in Portland, Maine, and talking to Harold Jones. Harold just got back from Florida, and we're in the HU-1 helicopter. One of the questions that comes up, Harold, is guys are asking me, what do you have to go through for a pre-flight, which is an outside inspection? But once you're inside the cockpit, what are you setting up for? How do you start the thing? What are you looking for? So what's the first thing you do once you get inside the machine here?
Well, I guess the first thing you do is put your seatbelt and shoulder straps on.
Okay.
Okay.
That makes sense. Yeah, okay. I was thinking more technical things, but you're right.
You want to...
Okay, so you get the...
I'd like to emphasize that a seatbelt is only effective if it's really tight here.
In the stomach, you mean?
Yes, because the submarining, you can submarine right underneath the belt. If you're in a crash, you can slide it off from underneath it.
That's what they talk about when it comes to cars. If you don't put your seatbelt on besides the harness, you can go underneath the thing pretty fast.
As far as the reel's concerned, you can lock this reel. You can lock this reel by flipping this lever over here.
Okay.
It means you can't move.
Right.
But it's inertia reel, so if you hit something, it's going to lock anyway. So I never use that.
Okay.
Okay. And the first thing I do when I get in, assuming I've done everything else outside, I would check my battery voltage right here, and I'd go over on battery.
All right.
And I would read the battery's on is not hooked up right now, but
right.
I'd read the voltage of the battery head down here, the voltmeter.
What are you looking for?
I'm looking for at least 25 or 26 or 27 volts.
And if it's too low?
Too low, you won't be able to start. Because when you hit the starter, your voltage is going to drop back. If it drops back below 15 volts, chances are you're not going to get a start because your igniters won't light, but the fuel's going in. Then as it spools up, the voltage will start building, and you're going to get a hot start.
Do you have an auxiliary power start here, or are you using battery all the time?
Oh, no, I use auxiliary power start for the first start of the day.
Okay.
But if the battery's is unplugged right now, if I had to hook it up, I'd go and hook it up. Turn this on battery, and you can read your voltage right off the battery.
Okay,
even if you're not running.
Assume you've got enough battery voltage then where?
Okay. Turn the battery on, and I'd make sure everything's off. Your transponder's off. This radio's off.
Communications equipment. Okay.
This radio's off, and check to see what lights it might have on. Bleed air's off.
This panel up here, is it mostly lights control? Besides breakers?
Well, it's all isolated. You've got lights here. You've got your inverters, phase button switch, your main generator, starter, standby generator, central bus, manual bus, switch. Breakers back here. And if you had a hydraulic failure, well, I'm getting ahead of myself, I guess. But if you had a hydraulic failure in flight, you'd pull this breaker here, the hydraulic breaker, and make sure that the solenoid switch hasn't malfunctioned. You might have lost hydraulics, but if you pull the switch and you get your hydraulics back, then all it was a malfunctioning solenoid switch, hydraulic system, instead of a real hydraulic failure. Okay. If you pull that breaker and nothing happens to control, they're still stiff, then you reach down, put this in the off position, and treat it like a hydraulic failure. Before I get ahead of myself on this, make sure everything's off. Then you take and roll the throttle. The throttle is all the way off right now. Fuel's off. Roll the throttle all the way on. I have to have power to do this because the solenoid won't work with it.
Right.
Switch off. Roll the throttle all the way on. I can go plug the battery in if you want me to.
I think just a brief description.
Roll the throttle all the way open. Then roll the throttle all the way back to flight idle. Make sure it comes against the stop. And that's so if you're in flight and you roll the throttle back, it wouldn't shut off. Make sure that the flight idle stop is working. Then push the button and roll it back all the way to off.
That button controls what? Solenoid?
The solenoid on the bell crank back there. There's the flight idle stop. So go all the way back to off, and then go all the way forward again, all the way open, then back to the flight idle stop. Push that, and then just come back off it just a little bit.
Okay.
Then turn the main fuel on, starting fuel on.
Now what's the difference between main fuel and starting fuel?
Well, this just gives you more fuel. Most of these H models don't have this starting fuel. Most of them just have a main fuel switch, that's it. The B models all had this. H models, I think this is the only one, or maybe two of them that we have that have this starting fuel. But then you take your clock here, and you've got 40 seconds to start the helicopter. So
40 seconds. Why can't you do it? If it takes longer, what's the problem?
overheat the starter.
Okay.
Plus the fact it should be spooling up by that, or something's wrong.
Okay.
On a battery start, it'll take about 25 seconds, and an APU start will take about 15 or 18 seconds to start. So the same time you hit the throttle with the trigger down, the starter's underneath here, just like a pistol grip.
Right.
And the minute you hit that, you hit the clock. And when you hit the clock and the starter, the next thing you check's the voltage, see how far down it's dropped. It shouldn't be below 15 volts.
If it does, you roll the throttle off.
Yeah, and keep motoring it.
Keeps spinning some of the heat out.
Yeah.
Because the throttle's on, so that means the minute you hit the trigger, fuel is going into the system, in the turbine.
Yeah.
So therefore you had some fire for a while.
Well, the way you tell if you have a fire or not is because of the exhaust temperature. When you hit the starter, nothing's going to happen for a while.
Right.
It's going to take a little while. Then as it starts turning, this needle's going to start coming up. This needle will go faster. This is the compressor here. This is the air compressor. It's called a gas producer, but actually air is a gas. It's an air producer. This is a compressor. And so as you hit this will start to come up because you got a fire going, and this will start coming up. And when you get up to 400 degrees tailpipe temperature, exhaust temperature, tailpipe temperature, it's up here. You turn the starting fuel off. 400 degrees. By that time, you should be up around 25 to 30%, at least probably 30% on your compressor. If there's too much of a spread between this and this, something's wrong. Either your battery's not strong enough, or you're not going to get a start, and too much time has elapsed.
And therefore you roll the fuel off again and let it spin up.
Therefore, you probably go for an APU if you're trying to start at the airport. But generally what will happen is when this gets up to 400 degrees, this is already up to 30 and building. So, in fact, sometimes they'll almost stay together, but you don't want too large a spread between your compressor and the temperature. Because after you hit 400 degrees and turn the fuel off, this keeps on going. This keeps climbing. When you get to 40% on your compressor, this is the N1, this is the N1 here, this is the N2. The N1 compressor is driven by a shaft. The first turbine in the engine, the number one turbine, drives the compressor through a shaft and it runs the whole length of the engine. So you get to 40% and then it's self-sustaining. It's running at 40%. Let go of the starter. And then you take your inverter. I usually fly one day on the spare and I fly the next day on main to get both inverters some use.
Inverter is the same as the generator?
Well, it changes the power.
This is the power up here that runs all the electronic stuff in the aircraft? Is that the power that runs the radios?
Well, the power is split up. You get AC and DC. See, you got two gauges here, right?
Okay.
AC power powers part of the machine. Then DC power powers part of your instruments and stuff. And you also got 115 volts, which powers those heaters back there for the blankets and stuff. You can run an appliance or a grill. See the plugs back there? Now let's plug somewhere in here.
Well,
usually on the bulkhead back there.
Okay, so that's why you have the inverter then.
Yeah.
Convert yourself over to AC juice for whatever is needed for.
So anyway, you flip this inverter on, and this inverter runs this gyro. The minute you flip the inverter on, you have to cage this gyro over here. And so it doesn't go nuts. And by that time you're on start anyway. Position here, this is already on. So you flip this on to standby. And either any ignition light's either on or if it's not on, make sure it's on. And we run our machines in an essential bus most of the time. Then you start out then now you're running and bring up to idle. And while it's idling, you do your tests. I can plug it in and get some lights for you if you want to. You get the caution lights and shit.
Oh, that's up to you. I don't want you to go through all the extra trouble.
I don't mind.
All right, I'll stop the camera a second. We'll be right back.
Well, this is the master caution light. If you're in flight, that light comes on. It's telling you to look down here and see what's wrong. But some things aren't lit right now. These will all be lit. These are spares. And I flipped these up so people see them when you're flying. They won't be concerned about these two red lights.
I see.
Lights on here. Just do this one and it takes care of it. Otherwise, if you're flying along and somebody saw these two things, they'd think something bad is happening, right? But when you first start up, all these lights are on.
You're sure the light bulbs are working?
Well, no, but like your low fuel warning light isn't on right now. It's not running. It's got to be running to transmit that signal. These will all be lit up until I cancel them. See that?
Right. Reset.
That's the way it's going to look.
Okay.
Oh, I mean, this is what you're going to have on when you start up.
Okay.
All these lights. If you lose any one of these things in flight, this light's going to come on first. It's going to say, look down here, you know, idiot, and see what you've lost. Look down here, it's going to tell you what you've lost. You've lost your emergency governor. You've lost fuel filter. It's clogging up. Turning your fuel lights on. Engine fuel pump. Right fuel boost. Left fuel boost. Engine chip detector. Oil pressure. So on down the line.
Is there an audible detector also?
Just for RPM.
Okay.
Well, I'm going to get rid of those, see?
Okay.
Those will stay on because it's not running, but they would normally get off. Then you go through and test your fuel, which you have to be running for that. Fire detection light. Check your controls, smoke. I meant to point out also that starting at by 25% your blade should be turning or else you abort the start. 25% of the air compression. About 20-25% the blade should be turning.
Is the clutch always engaged even when you're starting?
There's no clutch.
Okay. Right.
Well, sort of.
Can you start from left to right and just kind of point out each set of instruments so you have some idea of what they do? This is for people who don't fly.
Well, you got airspeed indicator over there, and the co-pilot side, your airspeed indicator over here. You got a gyro over here,
right.
And a gyro here. This is a more complex gyro than that one is, however you want to work. Same. There's an altimeter. It's a different type of altimeter you see than this one here is. However, you got the same altimeter. This is a little easier to read. You know, the setting is a little easier to read. Today, the pressure at the airport is about 29.47, I'd say. It's about pressure right here.
Okay.
They're similar. You got HSI.
Stands for what?
Over here. You got a vertical speed indicator. And you've got main generator switch, gauge, standby generator, and these both controlled up here. And on the flight before you go, you turn the main generator off and see what happens to the load down here.
Oh, yes.
If you turn the main generator off, the standby generator should pick the load up. That tells you the standby generator is working. Because the standby generator is also the starter generator. It just reverses its role. In this position here, it's a starter. In this position over here, it's a generator.
Okay.
They're both 300 amp. They're both 300 amp generators. So you turn the main generator off. Make sure the standby generator picks up a load. Now you know that it's working. When you get ready to reset the main generator, you come back to reset with that switch and hold it for a few seconds until it resets. And you go back to on and close the door. Then the load should be back on this generator. And you know both generators are working. But both generators are 300 amps.
Going from left to right. How about the gauges on top here?
Yep, fuel pressure.
Okay.
Well, I was telling you that the fuel pressure on at the fuel control and is telling you that the boost pumps are providing pressure up there. However, this will run below 4,600 feet. It will run without any boost pumps. It'll run from by the engine-driven pump. Atmospheric pressure will force enough fuel to keep it going. This might read 0, but it's still getting fuel. That's just pressure.
Okay.
Fuel quantity. This is in pounds. And we're normally about 1,500 pounds of fuel. And an easy way to look at it is that each 100 pounds is about 10 minutes of flying. So if you look at this gauge and you're on 800 pounds, just go back 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60. You got an hour's fuel. 'Cause we don't go below 200 pounds.
Okay.
And
Range? You're talking about 2 hours fuel time then? 2 hours something?
2 hours, yeah.
Okay. That means the fuel truck has to be close by.
Yeah, well, you get to a fire, you know, sometimes even before you get there, you decide that this more meets the eye is gonna take some fuel, so you call for a fuel truck. In most of the areas I've never had to wait for a fuel truck. I've never had to wait for a fuel truck. Fuel truck, if you get there and decide you're gonna need fuel, just call right then and there and they'll come. If you notice, these gauges are all tilted in different directions.
Yes.
In other words, they aren't upright. The reason for that is that when the needles in flight, the needles are going to all be pointing the same way. So when you scan here,
Catch it faster.
these needles are going to be the same. Instead of one needle up here, another one over here, these are all those needles will be flat like that.
Okay.
So you pick up quicker because you don't wait for a light to tell you something's wrong. You scan a lot in a helicopter. You can have a transmission oil temperature or an engine oil temperature fluctuation. It may tell you that if the thermal relief valve is not working too well. If you get a rapid rise and fall, rise and fall, rise and fall. Because most of these things are designed like your fuel system. If you get a clogged filter, main frame filter, you might get a light, a main frame light, fuel frame light. But if it clogs up enough, it'll bypass it so that it'll still get fuel, but you might be getting dirty fuel. If you plug the filter up, obviously that's contaminated fuel is going by the filter and going right back into the fuel control. So you scan these just from habit. Actually, a helicopter, you always working or flying. There's one eye outside and one eye inside. You don't fly like an airplane. You're looking out. People that fly airplanes don't tend to scan as much as people that fly helicopters.
Well, they haven't been trained for it.
They've been trained for it, but they get lazy. It's not so important anymore. Anything up there? Oh, he's climbing out.
Center console. Starting at the top.
You want to keep going across here?
Oh, okay. Sorry, I finished.
Well, there's the rotor needle's a short one. The engine needle's a long one. When you bring this up to full throttle before takeoff, it's going to go to 6,000 and stop. That's because your last flight of the day, you always beep the RPM down with the governor down to the 6,000 RPM, as low as it'll go. Then when you get in the next time you get in to start it, it's going to go up to 6,000. Bring the throttle up and lock it, and then you beep it up to 6,600. Both needles are going to be together, and it's going to be right in here, 6,600. If you lose an engine in flight, this lower green arc, this bigger green arc, is for the rotor needle. And when the engine needle goes back like that, all you have to do is keep what your primary thing is to try and do is keep this rotor needle in the green here, somewhere between 300 and 324 RPM. So this is the torque gauge.
Torque meaning
the amount of pitch you have in the blade.
Okay.
Amount of resistance on the transmission. This says oil pressure. That's a misnomer. That's an oil gauge. It operates off oil pressure, but it's not. It has nothing to do with oil pressure. It's a torque gauge. As you can see, it's redlined about 48 pounds torque. 48 pounds of torque. If you notice, all these gauges have slippage marks on them.
The white marks?
Yeah, and the mark extends over on the outside of the case.
Yes.
So if the glass slips, then you know that it's slipped, so you're not getting the right reading. If I take the glass and rotate, this mark's going to change. So just like this mark here, that's a torque mark on the glass. If I move that glass up, I could go to 55 pounds of torque. This will tell me that the glass has moved. Those are called slippage marks.
And then we're back to, it's getting warm, isn't it?
I'm getting awful warm, I know that.
And then we're getting back to the flight instruments again.
Well, let's see, there's airspeed, gyro, altimeter, vertical speed, pretty much the same as the other side.
Okay.
And the Hawes meter, time, clock, needle ball, pretty much it.
I see a lot of switches on the On the Cyclic, how many buttons do you have on it? What are they for?
I got this one here. This is a release, emergency release. Goes to the hook, and if this is armed up here on the overhead, cargo release is armed. That's armed position.
Okay.
Touch this button. It's gone.
Releases the bucket.
Yeah.
Okay.
This switch here is there's a radio switch, and halfway is intercom, and all the way is transmit outside. This is a force trim switch. This force trim is on, and you're in flight. If you put it down, you want to read a map or something, and you want to move the control. Just touch that, you can move it. This is the bucket release.
For the water drop, you mean?
Yeah.
Okay. Going over to the center.
This is a coolie switch here. This moves in 4 directions. You can see. This rotates your searchlight underneath. You got 2 lights underneath. You got a land light and a searchlight. And here's your land light. Here's your land light and searchlight. Land light is stowed. Searchlight is stowed. If you wanted to scan with your searchlight, you turn this on. That brings your searchlight out. And you turn this on. That lights your land light. Excuse me. That lights your land light. This brings it out. Then you use this. You can scan. That light will go up and down, back and forth.
Okay.
You can use this also for that. If you want to.
I thought it was a trim when I first saw it.
No trim.
In the center console, starting at the top.
Yeah. Well, it's a transponder here, pretty much. This is set up for. This is an encoding altimeter, and this is your ident switch here. They ask you to ident. Normally, you run this in the normal position, and whatever squawk code they give you.
Okay.
That's about it over there. You got a chip detector. You got a chip detector test switch here. Force trim switch. Hydraulic control is on. The more important switches have locks. You can't flip them off without picking up on them like that.
Okay.
You can't put that on. You can't move this without picking up on. This is a emergency governor switch. You see the shape of it. So at night you won't. This one's
Don't mistake it. Does he feel it?
Also, this has a guard on it here, so you would tend to feel that guard before you go flipping it. So if you're in flight, for example, you wouldn't reach down. This is on, you wouldn't reach down and flip it. You also have to pull this switch up. You can't flip it off without pulling up on it.
Okay, so you can't turn the fuel off by accident then.
Yeah, this is a comm radio here. There's a little comm switch here. This runs this one over here, and this switch runs this one over here. This is a military VHF test button. And this is the test button here. This is a UHF radio. These are pre-programmed frequencies that are in there. So if you want to,
The macro works.
if you want to go on preset mode with this thing, you just put this on a preset. This switch here in preset is a forestry 14,000 channel Wolfsburg radio, and this has kind of unique. Capability. We have these channels here stored in the east. This is the east side now. These are all in here. All you have to do in flight is just every time you move one of these, there's the 4. There's where I'm on. Right now I'm on 10. 10 is number 9 tower. So I just go around and around this knob.
Okay.
And then when I run out of those, I go on a B. And then I'm going again. Get all these. Then, if I find that I want to get a channel that I don't have, state police or Coast Guard or whatever towns, I can just dial in the frequency here.
Okay.
Dial in anything. Or manually, just pre-select whatever the frequency is. There's also a test button here. Also, if I was operating, let's say I was operating on Pleasant Mountain for Peter and I was on channel 2, and I went to a fire, they said contact state fire, which is channel 5 on B, right? So I go over on B and I go to 5. Now I'm talking to the fire department. And I would tell the dispatcher in Augusta that I'm going on a state fire. He knows that I'm always guarding our statewide, which is right here.
Okay.
That's the forestry statewide. So all I have to do is just listen to him. If he calls me, instead of having to go back on one to talk to him, I just push this little switch down here on guard and talk. It's a transmitter switch.
Okay.
It's always up here. If I want to talk to him, just go back on guard.
Now,
this is also a friction lock down here.
Where's that?
This is the manual friction lock. The lock's controlled. So when the airplane's off, when it's shut off, there's no hydraulics or no electricity. The force trim switch is not going to work anymore. No hydraulics, so we keep this thing from flopping around. This is a manual lock. You have to make sure before you take off. This is released. But you find it out before you lift off anyway. You check your controls for freedom.
Why don't you get going like this here?
I might mention one more thing here.
Yeah.
This cable down here is a lock, so if somebody gets in the aircraft, they can't, on the other side, they can't pull this up. It won't move, it's locked right now. I get this thing on.
So somebody won't accidentally grab it and cause you to flip over.
Or if you had to get out of the helicopter for some reason or something.
Okay.
That's an emergency lock cable. That's always on unless we're in here.
All right, so if you start the thing up, somebody pulls it by accident, it's a passenger, you won't end up flipping the thing over. All right, once you get going, then you're just, scanning all the time, looking for problems to happen? Once everything's checked out and you're running and just looking at the gauges continually meaning every, 15, 20 seconds?
Well, usually one eye inside and one eye outside. That's the way you work. That's why the gauges are all stacked. These gauges right here are the most important ones right here. They're stacked right in the file. This tells you your health of your engine. If you lose your engine, that's the first thing you'll notice right there, that your air compressor starts to die. You work with these because when you lift up water, you got one eye down here on the bucket in the mirror. One eye is down there watching the bucket. That's the only way you have to tell whether you're moving around or not. Because when you put the bucket in the water, you watch the bucket there, but you also watch to see how much torque you're pulling. So you don't want. Basically, one eye in the helicopter, one eye outside.
If you didn't have the mirror, you wouldn't know when the bucket was in the water?
Well, I'd know because I know how low to go to get the bucket in the water, but I wouldn't know if it's tipped or if it's filling or if the cables are twisted.
Okay.
You know, it's just like dropping the water. Unless you didn't have the mirror, how would you know that the wind drifted the water off one side or the other? You can see the whole thing in the mirror. You see the ground, you see the water, you see the pattern, you see if it's outside the black burned area or if it's inside the black burned area. If the wind carried it inside the burned area, you might want to offset next time and get over a little bit further to the right if you got a right crosswind.
When you're doing a water drop, then what speed are you going at?
Well, that depends on the kind of terrain you're in, or kind of not terrain so much, but what the fire is burning in. If it's heavy timber, for example, like heavy spruce or fir, you might drop slower than you would if it had a hardwood or a fairly open brush type fire. 35 miles an hour gives a good pattern for the average open or hardwood fire.
So you never hover to drop water, it's just...
Occasionally you might come almost to a hover.
How about
just let it go at the same time when lightning strikes or something. You might come in and you want to hit an old snag or something, you just come in and watch the bucket, and as it passes underneath your nose like that, you just bring the nose up like that and then let it go.
What kind of problem do you have though with the downwash from the rotor spreading the fire on or dropping debris on? Doesn't that a factor? Okay. I'm going to come up here, Al. What is this called?
It's called a hit check, H-I-T.
Hit check health indicator, or what are you talking about?
It's a health indicator test. And when this engine was installed in this aircraft, and these numbers were calibrated by by a test pilot
Can you turn it my way a little bit so I can see what it says? Okay. This is the health of the engine or the whole entire aircraft.
Yeah.
And how do you use this to determine what's going on today or tomorrow or whatever?
Well, the first thing you do is as it tells you here, turn off all bleed air, which is going to affect your engine performance. Turn the aircraft into the wind, which affects your performance. Maintain the N2, which is right here, at 6,600 RPM. Read the air temperature outside on your gauge here. Your thermometer. And at the line of the value nearest the free air temperature, enter the outside air temperature at that value, and set the N1 at the value indicated on the N1 column and stabilize, and allow everything to stabilize, then read your EGT from your indicator right here.
Okay.
And compare the EGT value with a baseline test. And here's your baseline test right here. Or this is what you're putting the difference of. This is the baseline test here. So you take your figures from this chart, outside air temperature, and your N1, and your baseline exhaust gas temperature. Then you make a notation here that if it's plus or minus whatever this figure is here is. If this figure is 416, let's say it's minus 14 on the outside air temperature. Well, it wouldn't be minus 14, but let's say it's plus 10. And this is reading pretty close to here, but this is reading 480. Then it'd be minus 1. If your baseline was 480, and when they calibrate this thing it was 481, then it's minus 1 here. That's not much differential.
And that's normal then.
Oh yeah, it's within the normal range.
It's my imagination is the wind picking up.
The sea breeze picking up because as the ground warms up, and the air rises over the ground.
Okay.
Then the air comes in off the ocean to fill the gap. Yeah, by 3 o'clock this afternoon or 4, it'll be blowing really hard here. Probably inland won't be blowing at all.
Catch the doors and let it slam shut.